Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to another mini episode of Relationscapes. We're mapping the stories and ideas that shape who we are and how we connect with each other so we can build a more just world. I'm journalist Blair Hodges, joining you from Salt Lake City, and in this episode, I'm excited to introduce Katelyn Burns. She's a journalist and podcast host of Cancel Me Daddy. Katelyn was also the first openly transgender Capitol Hill reporter in U.S. history, and she continues to be a leading voice among journalists on trans issues, which is not necessarily the cushiest job there ever was, and I wondered how she was holding up under our excessively transphobic regime right now. So let's dive right in with Katelyn Burns.
Gotta rearrange, 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 rearrange us. Rearrange us. Rearrange us.
Katelyn Burns, welcome to Relationscapes.
Thanks for having me.
I first heard about you on the Cancel Me Daddy podcast. This is a great show. Tell people a little bit about what you're doing on that show.
Yeah, so I co-host this amazing podcast, Cancel Me Daddy. People tell me it's the best named podcast in history. I'm not sure I believe that.
Relationscapes is pretty good. It's
But I'm on there with my co-host, Christine Grimaldi. And we've been doing our show since about 2021, I want to say. Like, my old co-host, Oliver Ash Klein, and I planned it during the pandemic year, and we launched in February 2021. This was at the height of, like, the cancel culture panic, which I think has sort of died a little bit over time.
Yeah, it's been replaced by DEI and other...
Yeah.
It's related, but they needed it to kind of rebrand it under other stuff.
Right. And it's sort of evolved over time. Like, our intro is we give thoughtful analysis and verbal posting.
Yeah.
And at the beginning, it was all verbal posting, and now it's almost... I mean, we still have a lot of fun with the show, but it's a lot more thoughtful analysis. And it's gone so far beyond cancel culture, where we've had very deep and meaningful conversations about how social media affects our lives.
Yeah.
One of my favorite episodes is we had a grad student and assistant professor from the University of Washington on and talked about why Twitter is designed to make you act like an asshole.
Yeah, it's true. It is.
Which is totally true, but there's like real science behind it. So we have those types of conversations.
Yeah.
We had an episode where we talked about this guy who got canceled on TikTok, which I don't even use, by the way. I'm too much of a boomer for that.
Yeah, I just started. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah. Yeah, we just created a Cancel Me Daddy a TikTok account, which...
For clips, right? You're probably posting
but I don't know what
Yeah.
I'm doing on there. It's...
Yeah. I feel the same. I feel like the gif of the guy that's like, "Greetings, fellow kids."
Yeah,
like
right.
The
It's
old
like,
guy with
it's like YouTube Shorts, and it's like that immediately outs me as somebody who doesn't get it.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
But we have a ton of fun. We have a fairly recent new co-host, Christine Grimaldi.
Yeah, you have a really great dynamic, and the episode I was just listening to was about private equity. So you frame it kind of tongue-in-cheek by saying, this week we're canceling private equity, but really you're saying we're going to kind of talk about the problems with private equity, let people know what it is.
Yeah.
It's a cool framing. I really like it.
Yeah. The term Cancel Me Daddy was originally designed to make fun of the people who go out of their way to get canceled for attention, right?
Yeah, they like it. They're like, oh no, please don't. But they're like, this is awesome. I love this. They know it's good for them.
To talk about those people, we coined a term called the cancel culture grift economy.
Yeah.
Where it's like, oh, I was canceled. Here's my book, and here's my podcast, and here's my TV show. You know, my YouTube TV show. And by the way, I have Patreon, right? And they make thousands of dollars. I'm like, who's giving these people money?
Yeah.
It's got to be like a money laundering scheme, right?
Yeah.
Like,
I like the little bit of kink to it too. The Cancel Me Daddy is sort of like they like this.
I start every episode by saying you're listening to Cancel Me.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so with that, people can check out that show. I want to talk to you about a column, though, that you recently wrote. As a journalist, you're not just doing podcasts, you're freelancing, you're writing a lot of journalistic pieces as well. And I recently read a column where you talk about what it's like being a trans journalist right now, covering trans issues in particular. And you said it's a real mind And here's a quote from you. You said, "I can't help but feel guilt at profiting from the suffering of my community while also feeling like I deserve to be fairly compensated for my work covering all these horrible new policies." So talk about being in that in-between space.
This is a space that I've occupied for just about the entirety of my career. And I think the quintessential example of this was back in the first Trump term. the first time around, he also tried to ban trans people from the military.
Mhm.
And I remember it was a big thing. It was one of the few times that he actually directly addressed trans issues in his own statements in his first term. The second term is completely different. Like they're all obsessed with us now, but
Yeah.
it was like a groundbreaking thing. And I forget the exact number, but I tell people now that I wrote 12 articles in 2 days about the first trans military ban. I didn't sleep either of those 2 days. I was basically up for 48 hours straight writing columns because there are very few freelance journalists who are actually covering trans issues.
Yeah.
So all of these editors for all these publications, but like these editors are like, you could tell they were in these editorial meetings going, who can we get to write about this? And they all had my name on their mind. And like, I'm a freelance journalist who's struggling to write and pay rent. I'm not going to say no to any of them.
Yeah.
So I went ahead and I wrote 12 articles in 2 days. I think I paid for 3 months rent
Wow.
with 2 days work. And I remember like getting paid for those things. And I'm like, one of the most horrific government policies in modern times, at least, presented against my community, I just turned into money to pay rent. And like, that kind of feels shitty in some way. Like, I'm not a trans member of the military. I'm not a veteran or anything. None of this affects me personally. And here I am getting a couple $1,000s for work on it. And I have a running joke with editors where it's like, you don't call me for good news.
Yeah.
And it's been this way my entire career because this is almost exclusively what I write about. Thankfully, actually, we mentioned the podcast earlier. The podcast has allowed me to write a little bit about cancel culture and online free speech discourse.
Yeah.
Which, like, it's frequently is related to trans rights, but isn't completely about trans rights. So it's given me sort of another beat that I can say, hey, I'm like a knower on these things. But still, the vast majority of my writing, my freelancing income comes from covering trans issues. And it's just really weird. It's like Trump could announce tomorrow that they're going to start executing a trans person every minute on the White House lawn for public viewing. And I could make thousands of dollars on that.
Also, don't give him any ideas. Like,
I mean, listen, it's not like I wouldn't be the first one or one of the first
Yeah,
people
that's
that
true.
he would put there. But
yeah.
before I go, I could make my kids a lot of money.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So you noticed you've seen a big difference between that first term and this term.
Yeah.
And you said in this piece that I read that the first 2 weeks of Trump's second presidency were by far the worst weeks in your professional career in terms of how much was happening. What were you seeing and what seems to be sticking at this point?
You know the expression trying to drink from a fire hose?
Oh, yeah.
That's very much what it felt like for me. It was very clear that they had a plan of every step that they wanted to take in the first month. They immediately rolled out and said no more passports issued with anything other than your birth sex, which is a huge deal. You saw it with the actress whose name I forget off the top of my head. I call myself a journalist, and yet I can never remember names.
Well, I'm Blair.
You're Blair. I'm Katelyn. But there's an actress. She's in Euphoria. She's trans, and she's one of the most gorgeous women. Not just trans women, but women on the planet.
Hunter
Schafer, thank you.
Yeah. Well, Google has helped out.
And she renewed her passport, and they gave her mail for her sex marker. Like, I can't imagine her flying to like Germany and having to explain to the poor German passport officer what's going on with this. It's like it's a huge restriction on our travel. It disincentivizes us from leaving. And there were some cases where these passport offices, and we're not quite sure if this was purposeful or if it was just because they were unclear on policy, but they were seizing the passports of trans people who are trying to get renewals. Even if the trans person said, give me like the marker you want.
Yeah, go ahead and misgender me even. I just want the ability to travel.
They were seizing passports and refusing to reissue them. And that's a kind of a really scary thought. Like, governments don't typically restrict international travel for certain minority groups unless they have bigger plans. So that was like the first big thing. And there's been, God, a dozen.
There's the great executive order that defined everybody accidentally as female when it said that we're like at conception our sex is determined and gender.
So the sex determinate conception is an interesting phrasing. It actually comes from anti-abortion activists because they believe life begins at conception, not at birth. So yeah, I was not a fan of the so we're all female.
Oh, you
joke.
didn't like it?
No, I
Tell me.
personally didn't like it. I know a lot of people did like it. I saw Representative Sarah McBride made that joke, and I was
Yeah.
kind of like cringing.
Yeah, tell me, like, what's the cringe on it?
I just, it's funny. I get it. I do. But also, it's kind of like the live gotcha of it all. Like, ha ha ha, you're an idiot. We got you again. And it's like, okay, but like, I can't renew my passport. What? Come on,
Okay.
man.
Okay, fair. Yeah, fair. Like, there's bigger thing. Why are we all focusing? Okay, that's fair. That's good.
Yeah, literally, I can't. Like, my passport renews in 2 years.
Yeah.
And as of right now, I don't know what I'm supposed to do with
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, okay, that's fair. So you got passports, you have the trying to legally define what gender is.
Yeah.
You have trans athlete ban stuff. Are there other ones that came through in the first little while?
Yeah, so the athlete ban, there was another one where Trump signed an executive order saying that we need to refuse travel visas to trans athletes, and then the State Department took that and said, no, we're going to deny everybody with a, quote, false gender marker on their foreign passport for a visa. So, which is an overreach. I mean, the athlete thing, I don't really want to get started on it, but
yeah, and you've done a lot of reporting on it, so I'll link in the show notes to some of the work that you've done on trans athletes in particular.
I think the public is grossly misinformed about trans athletes.
Yeah, no, I agree.
In general.
And we'll have other episodes about that too. I'll let listeners know we are going to dig in deep
good.
into that issue, yeah.
But it's just too much. We could spend the next hour talking about that, just that.
Yeah.
But I don't want to do that this morning.
Yeah, exactly. Okay.
Like just recently, there's another policy. They proposed a rule, like the Health and Human Services Department or agency proposed a rule that gender affirming care would no longer be listed as an essential service, so that we could see a return to the exclusions on health insurance policies against gender affirming care for ACA plans, like the Obamacare plans, which I'm on,
stuff,
and which I'm on and have been on for 8 years. If there's a state requirement that insurance companies cover gender affirming care, the states now have to pay for it, which might not affect me because I live, in a blue state.
Yeah.
But a bunch of red state folks will be directly impacted.
And then they're pulling funding from places that won't.
They erased us from websites. They erased all mention of
from Stonewall.
They erased trans people from Stonewall.
Yeah, this is real. This is they're going at it at every. They're being
purposeful,
very creative and at every angle that they possibly can. And in response, I think some leading Democrats, including that representative who delivered a response to Trump's first State of the Union, have tried to sidestep the issue. And Kamala Harris during the campaign didn't address all the anti-trans ads that the Trump campaign ran. She just kind of thought, I'm not even going to touch that. And some Democrats are calling this issue a distraction. And I wanted to hear your thoughts about that kind of framing. Now, this is a distraction. Let's talk about kitchen table issues for Americans.
Yeah. Well, guess what I talk about at my kitchen table?
Yeah. Oh.
But I guess that doesn't count.
Yeah. Well, we didn't mean that kitchen table.
Well, I moved here 2 years ago. I'm just now starting to make local friends because it's really hard to make friends as an adult, it turns out.
You're on the East Coast. Where are you at?
I am in an undisclosed location in Massachusetts.
Okay.
But I've gotten, some local friends, and some of them have trans kids. Like, it just so happens to be that. But what do you think they're talking about at the kitchen table?
Yeah.
It's kitchen table issues for who is my question back when they say we need to talk about kitchen table issues.
Yeah.
We should talk about economic issues. Well, guess what? My health insurance is an economic issue to me. If they're treating this as something that's not important, then that lets me know as a voter that my vote is not important to them.
Yeah.
And if that's the decision they want to make, that's fine. But that decision has consequences because there's a lot of people in this country who either are trans or care very deeply about the trans people in their lives and will punish Democratic politicians who don't defend us.
Yeah, you mentioned that there's varying estimates about the number of total trans folks in the U.S. It's hard to get numbers because not everybody's out. We don't know.
Yeah.
But they're ranging from like 1.6 million to over 4 million. And if those trans folks have loved ones or friends that at least one loved one, you could double that number of people who cared about it and then maybe even more. And so you point out that like that would be a city like LA or Philadelphia. Like if we had all
Somewhere
the
in
trans
between.
folks, it'd be somewhere in between there. And so I do think Democrats are like, they're spread out enough to not make much of an electoral difference. So I think if they're trying to make a political calculus on like how many votes it would affect in swing states or something, that might be the calculus they're making. The reason that I think that that's wrong is because it's a fundamental civil rights issue. And the more that trans rights are under attack, anyone's civil rights can come under attack. And if Democrats could just ignore that, or they could be the party that says, actually, we care about civil rights. Let's actually care about that and make that part of our platform at the kitchen table.
I will point out that Democrats lost the White House by a smaller margin than there are the total number of trans voters in this country.
Yeah.
So to say that we don't matter, or that they can do without us, I don't think is the correct political calculation. But again, you're right, the civil rights thing. And there's an interesting sort of civil war brewing within the Democratic Party over this, if you notice.
Yeah.
Because the next presidential election has already started for Democrats. I don't know if you've noticed.
I have.
This.
Our good friend, Governor Gavin Newsom, has launched a presidential platform podcast, and episode number 1 was throwing trans people under the bus.
Yeah, we did a Cancel Me Daddy episode about it.
It's great.
We titled it "We've Got Some Bad Newsom," which I thought was kind of
Yeah, it's
clever.
very good. Either that or maybe did you ask ChatGPT for help on that pun? Because
No, actually, it was. I have a group of trans ladies that I play first-person shooters with in the evening, and we had a little brainstorm sesh while we were shooting heads. One of my friends was really mad I didn't go with Gruesome Newsom as the title, but yeah. So yeah, you have Newsom who's throwing trans people under the bus. You have, I think Walz is kind of a middle ground guy. I mean, he's always been supportive of trans rights. Like, I would feel very comfortable with him at the top of the ticket. But he's kind of like, we made mistakes and we need to learn from them. But he's kind of non-committal about what he thinks those mistakes were necessarily. And then you have like J.B. Pritzker, who's like the great con of the Midwest, who's like, he's out here at the Human Rights Campaign like dinner going, there's trans kids all over the country who are worried that nobody's going to stand up for them. And for that reason only, I'm going to be that guy. And it's like, well, okay. So you have like a range of presidential white guys like taking different approaches to this issue.
Do you think Pritzker means that? Do you think he's sincere in?
I actually do.
Okay, good.
He strikes me as kind of like, he has that sort of, New York. Well, I don't know that New York has it. I think the outer boroughs of New York has this, or like Boston or Philly, but there's also like a Chicago like tough guy, like liberal tough guy thing that happens sometimes in these cities where they're like, I make fun of my trans friend over here, but that's my damn trans friend and I will defend her rights, right? Like, I think she's a piece of shit, but she's my piece of shit.
Yeah, all in the
thing, right?
It's like in the family kind of thing.
Yeah, and I don't think you have that necessarily as strongly in California with Governor Hairgel over there. So I don't know. It's interesting. It'll be interesting to see how this plays out, I think, within the Democratic Party.
The other thing I'd point out to Democrats is I don't think it's an electoral winner even pragmatically. So if Democratic leaders wanted to make the case and say, well, we have to do this, we're going to help trans folks, we're going to stand by them, but in terms of how we run, we're going to have to kind of throw them under the bus here. I also don't think that's a political winner. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so there's been a lot of talk lately about how like being anti-trans is not necessarily an election winner for Republicans. I think I was the first person to make this argument back in the day. And I first saw this in 2016. This was the red wave election that swept Trump into office. It swept Republicans across the country into office. But who was the big loser on election night? Do you remember?
No, Hillary Clinton. Oh, you mean Republicans?
oh, shit, that hurt.
I know. As
That
soon
was a
as you said
stab.
it, that's what came to mind, and it was a painful
No,
thought.
the big Republican loser was North Carolina Governor Pat McCrory,
Okay.
who was like the champion of the HB2 bathroom bill in North Carolina that triggered so much backlash. And you saw it kind of repeatedly over the years until this presidential election. And I think what the evidence shows at large is that when Democrats stick up for trans people and they're not afraid to fight over it, and they respond to attack ads, voters respond to them. But when they put their heads in the sand and they duck the issue, they let it fester. They let the transphobia grow and fester, right? Because if you look at like Joe Biden, Republicans tried very hard to get Joe Biden to say something outrageous in favor of trans rights. Like Joe Biden has been is one of our sort of OG political allies. He wrote the foreword for Sarah McBride's book where he called trans issues the civil rights issue of our time. And I remember early in his campaign, there was a conservative, like grifter media guy who carries around a camera, like a GoPro. And he was like, Mr. Biden, how many genders are there? And Biden goes, at least 3, and turns and walk away. And the guy says something in reply, and Biden's like, don't start with me, Jack.
Yeah.
And then you flash forward to this past year, and you get Kamala Harris being asked, about these attack ads that Trump is running incessantly, and she's like, I will follow the law.
Yeah, here's the thing. The way she answered seems suspect, and it seemed like Republicans are making a lot of smoke about this, and Democrats aren't doing anything about it. And so people think if there's smoke, there's fire, and public perception begins to change because the Democrats who aren't ready to go out there and be like, actually, no, this is smoke. Look, I can show you. This is fake. Look what's happening. Here's reality. They're just like, I will do that. I will answer very strangely to you about this issue and make it very uncomfortable for everyone. And then people are like, oh, crap, that smoke probably is fire.
Right. I mean, Kamala Harris needed to find her version of don't try this with me, Jack.
Yeah.
And she didn't.
Yeah.
And I think that's the lesson the Democrats should take away. But again, I have my own views on this, and I know that others very much disagree.
Yeah. And they could take it up with you in your video game group. You talk about it while you're playing first-person shooters. All right, we're talking with Katelyn Burns, a freelance journalist, host of the Cancel Me Daddy podcast. I wanted to kind of conclude by asking if you have any reasons for hope right now. What's keeping you going? What are you looking to stay awake and but also not completely burn out on all of this?
Yeah, it's interesting you should ask that because literally minutes before we started this interview, I filed another piece about this. So my story is I burned out hard during the first Trump administration. I burned out so hard that I was still burnt out in the middle of the 2024 election. And it wasn't until a couple months later that I was like, okay, I'm ready to tackle this again. And it was that pace that I mentioned earlier, the 12 articles in 2 days, that was the most extreme example, but I was writing 3 to 4 politics pieces a day for Vox in 2020, like as the election was in the heat of it. And I was writing feature stories also on the side about trans rights, and I know now that pace is unsustainable. I wasn't able to cover everything in the first couple months of this new administration, and I've given myself permission to say that's okay. And I just got off of like a 2-week break from serious social media use. Like I still use social media, but I was not scrolling for every last bit of information. My brain could not take it. There would be whole days where I would just leave my phone in another room. And I would play not a first-person shooter. I'd play a different type of game. I'm a big fan of so-called map painting games, which is like Europa Universalis, or it's like a Civ type of game. And I would just play that all weekend and not look at my phone once. And then on Sunday night, I open my phone and there's like, my mom has texted me 20 times going, are you still alive? Did the government come and take you? And I'm like, no, I'm okay.
Yeah.
So
we need an AOL away message like for our phones that's like, bling. You could put something like, I'm off listening to emo music or something.
I like Sabaton when the Wing Hussars arrive.
Yeah.
I play that when I attack the Ottomans in that game.
Yeah.
Anyway, by the way, I had an outlet pay me to fly to Sweden to cover video games. It was like the greatest
Oh,
thing
yeah.
ever.
That's
and
a
that,
dream.
That actually really helped me reset just before Trump took office
Oh,
again.
good.
But I don't know that I have a message of hope. I think that I will leave by saying, if you have trans listeners, our community has been in worse places in the past, and we survived. Not all of us survived, I will say that. We do have to take care of each other, but give yourself permission to not consume everything. We have good people like me, like Aaron Reed, and other trans journalists who are keeping track of the bad stuff. If you need a break, you can come back and catch up. Give yourself permission to not engage when you need it. And I know it's like a overused statement, but touch grass every once in a while.
Yeah. How about any advice for allies and people, friends, loved ones that want to be here for our trans friends? And what's your suggestions for them?
I think the biggest risk right now is Democrats abandoning us. I think that's the one firewall that we have against Republican cruelty. So when you see Democrats debating whether or not to throw us under the bus, I would say get in touch, be loud, let them know, hey, like, I'm not trans, but this is something that I care about. This is something that I will remember when I go to the polls. And be sure to tell them that you vote in primaries too, because I do think that we're going to see an unusually high number of primary challenges to incumbents. And we're going to have a chance to make shakeups with our leadership. And I do think that that is something that the Democrats who are in office right now are a little bit scared of. So yeah, let them know. There are people on Blue Sky who like give out call scripts when certain specific trans issues come up, but otherwise go to town halls. If you speak to your electeds or the staff of your electeds, let them know that trans issues are something that you think about at the kitchen table.
Good. That's Katelyn Burns, freelance journalist, and she was the first openly transgender Capitol Hill reporter in U.S. history. She hosts the Cancel Me Daddy podcast, and you can see her bylines all over the place. She's also the co-owner of the Flytrap, which is a feminist blog, right?
It is, yeah.
Excellent.
Me and 10 other amazing writers.
All right, so people can check that out, and hopefully you don't sell out to private equity anytime soon. Thanks for taking the time with us, Katelyn. This is great.
Thank you.
It's really important to stay up to date on issues that impact trans folks, not only because trans folks matter in and of themselves, but also because civil rights abuses against them often connect with civil rights abuses against other marginalized people and threats to American democracy more broadly. One of the best ways to stay informed is to listen to trans folks themselves. And there's a saying I picked up from disability activists, and although being trans itself isn't a disability, I think the phrase fits perfectly. Nothing about us without us. We shouldn't be making laws and policies about trans folks without trans folks being directly involved. We shouldn't be forming opinions without listening to trans folks, and we should be especially careful about news coverage on trans issues if it fails to include trans perspectives. New York Times, I'm looking at you. So I'm going to point you to a few great journalistic sources and encourage you to subscribe to their work and follow them on social media. First, journalist Evan Urquhart started his own independent news outlet. It's called Assigned Media, and Evan provides daily coverage of anti-trans propaganda and its effects. You can find it at assignedmedia.org, and Evan's also on social media, Blue Sky. Second, Aaron Reed is another terrific independent trans journalist who covers news about legislation that impacts trans folks. Her Substack newsletter is Aaron in the Morning. Both Aaron and Evan are really great follows on Blue Sky. Third, I'll point you to Nico Lang, and they are a non-binary journalist who you should follow on Instagram. It's at Queer News Daily. Nico released a book last year called American Teenager, How Trans Kids Are Surviving Hate and Finding Joy in a Turbulent Era. And I'm happy to announce that Nico will be joining us in an upcoming episode of Relationscapes to talk about that terrific book. And I'm also putting together a book giveaway with a signed copy of that book. So listen to that episode, follow me on Instagram to find out what that's all about. And finally, here at Relationscapes, I've published 4 episodes talking directly about trans issues. Every episode is trans inclusive, but these specific episodes are about books that deal directly with trans issues. And if you haven't heard these, then throw them into your queue. It's a nice little starter pack. There's Eris Young. Their episode is called Non-Binary Thinking. There's Abby Maxwell. She's the mother of a trans kid who wrote a terrific memoir about their family. The episode is called The Challenges of Parenting Trans Kids. There's Lori Lee Hall in the episode Trans in the Latter Days, a terrific memoir by Lori, who was the chief architect for the Mormon Church in the closet as a trans person and then came out. And then there's also the award-winning author Kyle Lukoff, and his episode is called A Haunted Trans Story. I put links to all these sources in this episode's show notes. You can find it in the episode description in your podcasting app and also at the Relationscapes website. And of course, we'll hear more trans stories and more research on trans issues in upcoming episodes. As always, I beg you to rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts or Spotify if you're enjoying what you're hearing. You can also email me your thoughts or send me a voice memo. The email is blair@firesidepod.org, or you can DM me on Instagram or TikTok. Thanks for listening to another episode of Relationscapes, where we're mapping the stories and ideas that shape who we are and how we connect with each other so we can build a more just world. Mates of State provides our theme song. Relationscapes is part of the Dialogue Podcast Network. I'm journalist Blair Hodges in Salt Lake City, and I'll see you next week for our next full episode.
Gotta rearrange.